Good morning and welcome to History with R&R Live. Today, as usual, Jeff Franklin joins me, and we're inviting on to the panel Revan, who
Hello.
voiced an interest in a couple of things that he wanted to come up and talk about on the History with R&R Discord. So here we are for the next 2 weeks. This morning and next week, we're going to cover different parts of Ireland's history. And it's not really it's not something I'm really depth in. So mainly it's going to be us talking to Revan about these things because Revan has taken a lot of his time over over the years to research these things
Mm-hmm.
because he's in Ireland. So, and I think it's a really interesting way to do it because a lot of people can sit there and just spout facts and figures but unless you've lived in the country where this took place, it's a very different perspective. So I'm hoping over the next little while that through these live streams, we can bring those different perspectives on how these events affect people who live there now. So with that, before we get going here, I'm going to quickly say hi to a few people in chat. John Jamarco was first. Welcome. Mary's Game Room, Marcus. Let's see who else. Far
Purple
That's
Vivian
he's
here.
he's a
Gar.
member of Potato Revan. That is Farv.
Oh, okay. Hey, okay. Sorry, I butcher names. It's the Irish in me. The not so smart side. No, I'm just kidding, right? Lad, we'll be fine. Andrew 4682. How are you doing? Professor Brainy Specs, who is on my panel. Mark the Infinitely Tired, who will be making his debut this Friday. It was supposed to be last Friday, but I just wasn't feeling well last week, so we're gonna push it all to next Friday and get that video out. So Mark will be joining us on the History Roundtable. This should be fun. Purple Valkyrie, welcome. I hope your morning is good, and I hope you have a great show later on today. Let's see, is that it? Oh, Bird of Prey 5, of course. Kapla, welcome, Bird. I hope you're doing well. I hope Mummo Prey is doing well this morning. Old Media Guy, welcome. And with all that, I think I've got everybody. So, first of all, the first topic we're going to kind of have a roundtable discussion on is, we make the joke now. When you think Irish, you think leprechauns, you think green, you think beer or other alcohol, and potatoes. Which is weird if you think about it. You go from they drink all day to potatoes. These are the things you make fun of Irish for. Potatoes and drinking, right? So, Revan, why don't you tell us where the potato thing started?
So the potato thing started basically because due to religious reasons, the British would not let the Irish farm any of their own stuff. So the only thing that we could grow locally and on the crop soil that we were given was potatoes. So the poor Catholic Irish would only eat potatoes. That was their entire diet because you were legally not allowed to eat anything else. You couldn't fish, you couldn't do that, you couldn't hunt or anything like that because you would be straight up executed. So the British had these things called the penal laws, which are still in effect. And for a century, we basically had the potatoes were failing. But then in 1844, there was a Europe white blight, which is a fungal infection in the potatoes, which affected Europe, but it affected Ireland mostly because the Irish soil is so wet, which made the fungus explode. And because that happened, over 1 million people ended up starving because the potatoes all died out for a period from 1844 to 1858. And Ireland has still not recovered from it because the arable ground up in Connacht is still rampant with blight and it's mainly dead up there. Like there's no farmland up there for anything viable. up in the northwest of Ireland.
And that's why you still let the British have the North. No, just
And
kidding.
that's the northeast.
Just the Northeast, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the nice part.
Yeah. But yeah, so I find that interesting because we make jokes about it now,
Yeah,
right? But we don't know the reason behind the joke, and
no,
I've always found that funny in
weird.
a way,
Yeah,
right? Like you always the old doobity doo potatoes, right?
yeah,
That whole thing is making fun of a time in Irish history where people died. Like
yeah.
that's the whole thing, right? And I just find it ironic that people make the joke but don't know why.
Well, another thing that you wouldn't have known about that time period is the British did not care at
No.
all. And they were taking enough food out of Ireland. When you see Law Shuns reading this, I love seeing their reactions, right? There was enough food in Ireland to end the famine in an hour being put out and sent to the empires. They said in one day, my ancestor, my cousin has books from him from the time of the famine. He's in America. And it says that because he was a white boy, which is a rebel of his time. And he turned around and he said that there was 10,000 pigs. He was a naval captain. He said that on one of the ships that he had to guard going over to Canada, that there was 10,000 pigs in the flotilla being taken out of Ireland. He said, well, when he walks back, he has to check how many kids he has left when he'll get home.
Yeah. Like
It
it's just mind-boggling to me. Like
is.
you'd think, your own people are dying. It is the ultimate. Well, there was no Ireland First movement at that point.
No.
Which we'll get to, but that'll be
Yeah.
the second topic of the day. But just thinking about that, right? Just men, women, children dying,
British
and
actually
all
stopped.
all of your produce is being shipped away,
Yeah.
and we tend to pride ourselves. No, that doesn't happen here. That doesn't happen, in civilized society. That happens elsewhere, where one baron takes over, and the. But back then, that was just the way it was.
Actually refused to let out the Tsar of Russia, Nicholas I, Alexander the Great, not the Great, of Russia, him, then his son Nikolai I, not the one who was there in 1919, his dad, right? Then Frederick the Great of Prussia, the American president, and the Sioux Indians of the Americas all tried to send in total £1 million. The British said no because Queen Elizabeth only gave £2,000 to Ireland during the famine, and she would not let any other empire, monarch, or anything like that show her up. So the Germans were shipping in fish to the British, but at the end of the thing, what they were doing was they were trying to feed as many Irish as they could until they were stopped, and that kind of helped spark a mini war.
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks, old media guy. Alexander II, Tsar of Russia. Yeah, he tried to help. Then there was Frederick I, of Prussia, and he tried to help, and the Sioux Indians. And we actually have a monument because the Sioux Indians sent over an Indian himself to go and visit, as he claimed, family in Ireland, right? Which he didn't. And when he walked in, he had £2,000 hidden on his body, which was never discovered. And they brought over £2,000. And now the Sioux Indians have a statue in the Garden of Heroes in Ireland.
So with the potato famine,
yeah,
now that basically affected the entire island, like all of Ireland.
yeah, Before that, the Irish religion was basically, think of Irish mixed with Wicca, like
Yeah,
Catholicism mixed with Wicca.
yeah. The old
That's what,
druids and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, the Druids were gone, but there was still a lot of the like Wicca practices, reincarnation and things like that. Dad, if any of you have ever heard the term Irish Catholic next to the term Roman Catholic, that is why. We were literally our own separate thing. But up until the famine, that's what we were. And then the Catholic Church came in and they fed us in around the 1860s, and we all really, really latched onto it. And we're like, oh, yeah, we'll follow you. There's actually a very funny story about it. In Inishmahan, which is an island just off Galway, there was this Anglican who saw a load of Catholics who were after erecting nets and they were trying to survive eating fish only. And he's like, I'm going to buy a load of food. And if they convert, I'll feed them. And I will like bring civilization and religion to this place. And all he had of the island, a 100% conversion rate. The famines, like people went to his church every single day, got a bowl of food, went to his worship, said prayers, went home, done their thing, and next day food, everything like that. The potatoes started growing again. Crops returned. His attendance rate fell by 100%. No one actually believed what he was saying. They're only going there for the food.
Yeah. And that kind of happens a lot throughout Ireland. I mean, there's always that, whether it be Catholicism or the time honored argument, which we'll get into, I think, another day,
Yeah.
but because it's a long speech, but the the real war that was between the Protestants and the Catholics, it's
Yes.
still there to some degree.
It's still there because in Ireland, the Protestants, if you're Protestant in Ireland, you can tell who's an actual Protestant in Ireland, in the Republic, because they've got a certain air about them, and they actually speak different.
Yeah.
And they still do have more money than your average Irish person. Most millionaires in Ireland are Protestants.
Yeah.
To this day.
And why is that, Revan?
Because most of them, because the Catholics weren't allowed to have businesses, while the Protestants, I'm not talking about the Lords because, well, they all died, but they basically, what happened was, let's say for talk's sake that you set up a business and you were allowed to ship to the empire because you were Protestant, right? You're allowed to trade with the world, with the different empires and the United States of America. And then you were like, oh, hey, this works, that works, let me do this. And you end up making millions upon millions upon millions. Then the Irish weren't allowed to do that. They were only allowed to work for you, but they were not allowed to have proper money, and you weren't allowed to pay them proper wages because they were Catholic.
Yeah.
If you wanted to be educated, you had to. This is why I'm speaking English, because they did such a good job destroying the language that the language was nearly gone by the 1890s, 1900. In Ireland, in a population of 6 million for the entire island, there is only 10,000 native speakers of Irish left.
Yeah, Gaelic is pretty much
dead,
gone by the wayside.
Yeah, it's sad to see. I mean, like we get taught it, but it's taught wrong, and it's like, as we call it, it's taught Con is a taught there is my fair and mere and you're like, I'm awake.
Yeah.
No one can listen to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the British done a very good and thorough job at getting rid of it. And have any of you ever heard of priesthoods?
Say it again.
Say that I have.
A priest hole.
No.
So it was from the hold on. Favre says, on a side note, a lot of the Irish who immigrated to the US were indentured, and they were treated considerably whereas then purchased slave labor, which is very, very true. And we were actually the predominant slaves in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And um and that
Which
and
is
they
something I'd
no,
love to get into, but that's
not
a
today.
whole other show.
Yeah. But they turned around and you're there. What was I saying? Before I got distracted by Barb.
You were talking about priestholds or
Oh yeah,
Catholic
so
holds.
basically the priest hold was like if I'm a Catholic and I couldn't trust you guys as friends because you weren't Catholics, I couldn't trust you, right? Because the thing is, if I was there going to church and things like that, and we all know how religious the world was back in the 1800s,
Yes.
and if we were to practice the Catholic faith, we'd be executed. My great grandfather, he said that he went outside and his older brother, his dad said that they found him one day in a tree, hung, tarred with feathers on him as a warning. And things like that are throughout every Irish family. And what we used to do was people used to hide in ditches, and they used to say the masses there, and then you'd have people who could shout really, really far, or someone with a dog, right? So they'd have the dog, and the dog would be posted down at the end of the road, and Jimmy'd be there sitting on the thing reading a book with his dog or something like that, maybe fixing a broken cart or painting, doing whatever, just having a reason to be there with your dog. And when he'd see the army coming, like with a telescope or something, he'd kick the dog would start barking, they'd hear the barking, and everyone would scatter. It was a warning system. And that's what we had to do, because if the priests were found, the priests were executed, and all the people there were fined. We had these things called poorhouses, which in Ireland, if you read anything in your genealogy, it's the one word that every Irish person is scared of. Poor union. That is the one, because basically when you go, it's hell. Pretty much, it's the prison that you paid to go into.
Yeah, it's kind of the original, the origins of the old poorhouse.
Yeah, it is.
I'm going to end up in the poorhouse. I'm going to end up in the poorhouse, right? That's where that turn of phrase came from.
Yeah,
I'm going to end up in the poorhouse. Yeah.
As someone who done genealogy, I found out on one of my family, and I actually cried when I read that he died in one.
Yeah. Oh,
like
thousands.
Yeah, thousands of them. But actually seeing the words next to someone you're related to.
Oh yeah, it's
and
that's again why I want to kind of start doing these with the live streams, because there's one thing for me and Jeff to get up and talk about, even just say the potato famine. It's another for someone who still lives in Ireland and can see the how these things from back in our forefathers' day still affect us. Like we would have never been able to know that there are still farmlands in Ireland that are affected still. Like, to us, this is so right. This is so far in history. Well, that was then. This is now. Modern technology, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
It's a thing of the past, but in reality, it's not.
My grandmother, growing up in the 40s, had no food. The Ireland was still starving. In the 40s, we were out of the famine and things like that. But food wasn't back. Fat people didn't start appearing in Ireland until 85. That's when we started getting like proper food and everything like that, through different laws and different treaties brought in from Europe and that. My grandmother said that when she was growing up, she got a thing of sweets broke up between her and her family, and that was their Christmas present.
Yeah. Like, to us, it's just astounding, because we look at this like, oh, well, that was back in the 1800s, or that was back in the early 1900s. That couldn't have been like yesterday. And to a lot of people, it still is. And I mean, there is still that divide. Like, before we transition, I'm just going to do a quick little blurb here. because this is a perfect leeway into the next topic. But I'm just going to do this quick. So just so everyone gets well warning here, I'm going to throw up. This is the only thing I'm promoting in the store, which the link should have been thrown in by the bot. If not, it's in the description of the video.
I've seen the box.
Yeah, it's
I when I opened my store, I wanted everyone who knew the late co-host of this show to have something that if they wanted, they could put up on their mantle or whatever. And it was a memorial mug to do. However, I stated when it went up that this would be very, very limited run, and it is going to be taken off the store at the end of the month. But I wanted, I just want, if you wanted to get a chance to do it, this would be your time, because after this month it'll be gone. And to me, it was just a way that I could have someone to, some way to, for everyone to have a memorial of him if they wish to do so. But it's there if you want it. It's there till the end of the month. May 1st it comes down, and then we kind of move on. But it will be there till the end of the month. I feel kind of conflicted because on one way I don't want to be like, get it well before it's gone. But at the same time, I want everybody to be aware that it is coming down. Paula and I had talked about it, and we both agreed to make it just a limited run. So on that note, I'm doing so. So May 1st, it will come out of the store. And again, I also want, while I'm talking about the stores, History with R&R has two logos. It has the original logo and it has the one that I use now. The original logo will always be in Doom Store. Doom Store's link is always in the description of every History with R&R video. That store is run by Paula Simpson, his wife. I understand that once she figures out the ins and outs of it, which I'll be working with her on, there'll be new stuff added. But that's her store, and the original logo will always have its home there. The new logo is in my store, but the original logo will always be on Doom's store. Just it was something that we had decided back then. All right, so enough with the promotion stuff. Now let's move over to the next topic. And as I was kind of referencing, there are a lot of things, including the potato famine, that still resonate today. And we kind of make a joke of it now, but the original War of Independence for Ireland.
Yeah.
Why don't you give us a little bit of backstory? Because I could sit here and quote the numbers, but you've done a lot more research into this than I have. So.
My grandfather was actually part of it. From beginning to end, and so was her granddad. So I know people who've heard these stories. So basically, sick and tired of the treatment from the famine. Sick and tired of after seeing what America could become. Right? And sick and tired of being treated by a monarch who does not care whatever for them. People started saying, do we need to be a kingdom anymore? Our kings are dead. We don't owe anything to. So 3 separate ideas came out. 1, a brand new kingdom, a brand new king, and a brand new monarch will be born, right? And we will have the Kingdom of Era. That was going to be the new name of Ireland.
All right.
Number 2, communism, right? And a socialist country.
Yeah.
And number 3, what we have today, right?
Yeah.
Number 2 lost because they basically said, you know what? We don't need that shit. We've seen how they treat the people. We don't like it. Then number 1, we actually came very, very close. We offered the throne of Ireland to the Kaiser, son, right? We
Okay.
actually offered it to him, and then we're like, you know what? We don't need this.
Well,
So
we
then
sobered up about
we
that.
sobered up, got our brains in order. So then Eamon de Valera, who was an American, he became one of the first prime ministers of Ireland, and including the president of Ireland. Right? He served in both offices. He's hated in Ireland. Right? It
Okay.
depends on who you ask. He was a bit
Well,
of a
of
pig.
course, like anything.
Yeah. Then you have Michael Collins, who we regard as George Washington, who I'm proud to say is a cousin of my great great grandmother.
Okay.
And so my gran was there, and the entire family was really, really connected to him. We called him Big. My gran said her granddad called him. He knew him personally. He went to his birthday parties. He went to Christmases with him. He knew him well. And he called him Big Mike and everything. And my gran still has a letter that my gran's passed, but she still had a letter that said when it died, and she said that her mom said to her that she remembers when they got the word that Michael Collins had passed away. You'd swear that my great grandfather was after losing a child. She said he couldn't stand up. He was on the floor bawling. But he was actually assassinated, and we don't know by who. No one knows who killed him. And he was actually killed in an open top car driving down a road. But so back to the thing. So in Easter 1960, I'll go back to 1914 at the outbreak of World War One. All the British Empire called for all the men of the empire to be trained, which was their biggest mistake.
Yeah,
because they trained the Irish how to fight. And then the Irish were coming home, and people were staying at home, and there were like more home guards being at it because we were so close to the German Empire at the time. We're like, hey guys, we're the back door to England. If you take us, you can technically take the empire, right? And they're like, okay. So Irish people, and then we were like, lads, what? We're not supervised. What? All their tanks and their guns, they're like, they're over in Europe. Let's start some shit. So the Easter Rising was not designed to succeed, and it went off very, very badly. So what happened was they were saying, lads, we're not doing it. It's not going to happen. Like, they had 20,000 people to do it, right? And they're like, it's not going to happen. It won't do it. It ain't going to work. Then one guy on a bike, I want to say Patrick Pierce in English, right? What we call him. Patrick. He cycled around with letters and phone calls, and it's like, lads, it's on. We're going tonight. We're going tonight. Now, Robert, I will ask you a question as a history buff. Where would you start a revolution? What type of building would you start it from?
Well, traditionally they start in like a tavern for the most part, and then they usually end up moving to like a building of commerce or political building. Usually,
a post office.
That'll work.
Yeah, that's where it was. And they fought the British Empire there for a few days. They fought the British, and they lost. Right?
Well, post office, the post office today and the post office back then are two different things. I mean, the post office back then was a bigger, played a bigger role than it does now. So back then, in a way, the post office makes sense.
Yeah, mountains. I think I'm not sure which side. I know that one of my great grandfathers was on Michael Collins' side, and I know that the other great grandfather was on the anti-treaty side. So I had family on both sides as well. I think that my grandfather basically only went. My granddad went with Michael Collins because he was his cousin, and blood is thicker than water. So I don't know his political beliefs. But it all ended out the same way. His side won. So then all the leaders of the Easter Rising were brought to Wales, and they were in prison camps in Wales, and they kept reporting in the newspaper what they were doing to them, how they were being treated, and the Irish people were getting madder and madder and madder. And in Kilmainham jail, they executed all of them. They brought them to Kilmainham jail. I think it's in Cork, but I'm not sure exactly where Kilmainham is. So they brought him there and they executed him. Right?
Yeah.
They left a few of them. De Valera, Michael Collins, and a few others got away with their life. But they executed Barry, who was 14. Then they had another guy who couldn't stand, so they basically tied him to a chair and shot him. And this is in the jail, and the Irish people saw this, and they're like, you know what? Fuck this. So they turned around and they said, congratulations, you turned an army of 1,200 people into an army of millions. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's the old story of, you take too much force against something, and instead of quashing it, instead you built martyrs, and you solidified a country against you is what you've done. Just a quick, because I want to be able to try to keep up with chat, so I want to say welcome to Mountains of Elysium, and I want to welcome Thomas Potts, Stone Loki. Welcome, sir. Hope you're all enjoying the show, and it's kind of a different look. We're kind of going through, not really rambling too much about actual like blah 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 blah, because I don't know, those things just kind of sound too mundane.
And I want to thank Farvivian Guard for $50 donation to Paula Simpson. That is awesome. Thank you so very much. And John DeMarco also donated.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that means a lot.
That means a lot. And
for any of you, can I just do a quick plug?
Yeah, go ahead.
For any of you guys in the chat who are really, really into retro gaming and things, Farvivian Guardian has actually started a retro gaming channel. He is drastically and hilariously undersold. He's just starting out. He's finding his feet. But guys, if you're into retro gaming and things, and he's a great laugh when you listen to him. He's a great guy overall. He's a vet. He's one of the best guys I actually know. And
awesome.
I consider him like a very good friend. But I honestly think that everyone here should go and sub to him, and if you can, sub to him twice.
Well, if you like the content, and if it makes you laugh, because we need a lot more of that these days. Definitely do that. So kind of rounding back the wagons a little bit, but that happens a lot. Like if you think about it, it's what Pearl Harbor was. It was the rallying point, right? And it happens so much in history, which makes me wonder why people keep trying that. Because all it does is you take a divided people and you galvanize them towards... Right, you take something where people were on the fence, or, well, it's not really my place to get into, and then you do something like that where, well, now you've just made it so everybody is pissed, and you've galvanized all these people that you wouldn't have had to deal with before.
Yes.
And it's happened time and time again throughout history, and people still think this is what this is going to work, and it just doesn't.
Well, I find it really interesting that they actually did this. Is the British channel? How did anyone here actually watch Downton Abbey?
The which?
Downton Abbey.
No, I haven't. I don't think so.
In the first season, Mary, she goes to the younger daughter. She's a lady, and she goes over to Ireland during the War for Independence. During the War for Independence, the Irish, we killed all the nobles. Like, we hunted them down. I mean, what we did to Sligo will get your channel taken down, so I won't tell you what we did to him. Right?
There's many moments in history that'll get this channel taken down.
Yeah.
Which is a sad state of affairs, if you ask me, but that's okay.
But people don't want the truth out there.
It's kind of it's a big graphic. Someone done something with a shovel to the child.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah. So anyway, in the show, she's there and she's on the phone and she's like, "Dad, hello, Dad," and you see people and she goes quiet because she has the "hello, father" like type of British like noble accent, and she's in the middle of Dublin, and the British are going up and down, and she has to be quiet because if the Irish hear her, they'll kill her. And she's on the phone and she's like, "I have to get home. I have to go home. I need to get out of this country." And her dad's panicking, and then when she gets home, she dies of some infection she got. But basically, the Irish were out for blood, and they were out to kill her. And there's all these videos and everything. And what I find interesting, in 1909, King Edward, I believe, or is it King George? Who was the king during World War One?
George, I think.
Right. So he came to my city, right?
Okay.
And all the soldiers have the flags.
George Smith.
Yeah. And they were all standing there with the royal banners and everything like that. And you know the way that usually the soldiers look at the king as he's going by, they all look at him like they turn their head with him.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't. The Irish Catholics who were in the army stood there looking straight across at each other. They did not turn. Yeah. And I'm saying that the sparks of rebellion had already been laid in the minds of the people. They were just waiting for something to kick off.
Yeah.
And they turned around and they said, so at another point, during the War of Independence, which I think is the most devastating fact, is they had a vault in Ireland with records going back to the 11, 10, even early Viking eras, right? Kept safe and preserved. And someone said, our Irish history is the history of the British monarch, the British Empire. We don't want a monarch. We don't have a history, so they burnt it to the ground. All that survived was the 1901 and 1911 census. And this devastated us. It's as someone who's into history, genealogy, this is absolutely devastating. I can't find records of my family. I can't find my 5 times great grandfather who was in the military. I can't find his name. And I'm like, this should be easy as click, click, click. Because you look at year history, you look at the English history, and the names are right there. Ours are gone. We don't have a history. We have a brick wall. That's what we have nowadays. And we can't get it past this. And there are things left over because a lot of Irish people are still angry at the British.
Yeah.
You hear people saying up the ra all the time, mostly teenagers being little edgelords. And that without historical context of what that actually means.
Well, yeah. Well, and that's the sad thing is people hear a phrase that sounds good, but have no idea what it means. Like absolutely no. And actually, there's a 3-letter Irish thing that I really shouldn't say on my stream because people will get mad. But even that, they don't know what it was about. They have no clue. Not a damn clue. They know what was publicized.
Yeah.
They know what, they know the general idea. But and one of these days I'm going to actually sit down and we're going to have a conversation on them, and that'll be a show that'll be interesting. But
need to be careful.
Again, it's not something that you hear the tagline, but you don't know the meaning. You don't know why. You don't know why you're doing it. It's like I can revert it back to Canada a little bit. There was about 6 years ago. There was we have a monument in France, in Vimy, for World War I, Vimy Ridge. It's a huge monument on the battlefield, and it's to all the soldiers that died at Vimy. Canada decided that they were going to refurbish the monument because it was getting old and it needed work. So they closed it down to the general public. They did the refurbishment, and at the grand opening, there was an argument that went all the way to the prime minister. What flag to fly? A lot of people were like, well, the red ensign doesn't belong there, just the maple leaf, because that's the flag we use now. The maple leaf is the one we use now. The red ensign was the flag that those soldiers wore on their shoulder. It wasn't the maple leaf, it was the red ensign. And because people don't do history, couldn't understand why we would fly the red ensign at the memorial. Because that flag's dead. That no longer matters. It's the maple leaf now. Yeah, but that wasn't the flag that was on that battlefield. The flag that was on that battlefield was the red ensign. Luckily, common sense prevailed, and the red ensign does fly at Vimy Ridge. So does the maple leaf.
Yeah.
But there was a movement because people didn't know and looked at the red ensign as a bad thing. The red ensign shouldn't be flown.
There's a flag here in Ireland because officially the Ireland became known as the Irish Republic just after the War of Independence. And our flag, because we were a Dominion, our flag was the British flag with the harp of Ireland in a circle in the middle of it with a tiny little crown. Right? That was the official flag of Ireland at the time. Historically, and the Irish government does not even acknowledge that flag's existence today.
Yeah.
You cannot even get replicas of this flag. And I was looking and I'm like, wait, that's an actual flag? When I was shocked and I'm looking into history and I just turned and I'm like, wait, that's an actual flag. Like, and I'm there and I'm like, okay, that's weird looking. And then we became the Irish state and we used the green flag and then we used the tricolour. But now officially the government says at the end of 1916 we were using the tricolour all along. Because that's the flag we use now. But historically that's not the flag we've used all along. And the actual Irish Rebel flag, I actually have it hanging underneath my window. Right? Yeah. The Irish Rebel flag. It says Éireann go Bragh, which means Ireland forever. Chocolate Care Law, our day will come. That's the entire saying. Éireann go Bragh, Chocolate Care Law, Ireland forever, our day will come. Right? And that is the flag that if you brought my ancestor back from, say, my 4 times great grandfather, who was a spy, right? You said, hey, which flag do you fly under? You show him the tricolour, which is the flag, and you look up at it like you're like, this is the flag, and it's like, the hell is that thing? Hold on. Sorry, there's a knock at the door.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Like, for instance, like in the top right-hand corner, I believe. There we go. That's the red ensign. That's Canada's original flag.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. And you ask most Canadians now what that is, and they have no idea. There was no flag before the maple leaf, as far as most people in Canada are concerned.
You know Murdoch Mysteries?
Yes.
Yes.
That actually has that flag flying on the ships and outside of the police station.
That's different. That's different. That's the British red ensign. Because on the ship, you would be looking at the naval ensigns, which are red, blue, and white.
Yep, same as us.
Yeah, that's the British. The British blue, the British red, and the British white. And depending on which flag it was, would depend on what ship it was. Whether it was a military ship, civilian ship, or royal ship.
What made me laugh was in one episode of Murdoch Mysteries, they're like, oh yeah, there's like, they know that the Irish, because there's a large population of Irish in Toronto, and they're like, oh yeah, these are like Irish rebels, a lot of these lads are rebels. We have to be careful. This is what the police were saying. Where would you park the ship belonging to the princess that she came in? And I don't mean a warship. I mean like her personal ship. Where do you park this? In the city where it's protected by, just being in the city? No, they park it right next to where the Irish live.
Oh, yeah. That probably went over like a lead balloon. But with that, I think what we'll do is we'll end it here. Next Monday at 9 o'clock, we're going to have Revan back, and we're going to continue our look at Ireland. And I hope that this has been somewhat informative. I hope that everyone has enjoyed the conversation. And I hope to see you all next week, where we will have Revan back, and we'll talk a little bit more about Ireland. And till next time, take her easy, folks. And as Doom used to say, thank you and good night.